So imagine you're applying to a prestigious university. You're filling out your application, and you see a number of essay questions, and you come across this one. What matters most? How would you answer that? It's a tough question. Aspiring applicants think, sure, this will be easy. Family, friends, oxygen, passion. I know what matters most. This will be no problem. So they put it aside and they move on to the rest of their application. They get their references in, and a couple weeks later they return to this question and they realize they run out of time and they don't know what they're going to answer. This is a difficult question. What matters most for you and what matters most to me can be very, very, very different things. For some, knowing that lunch is right around the corner, lunch probably matters most to you right now. So your answers can take on a purpose statement. It can be a philosophy. It can be a passion. It can be your greatest love. It could be a person, a place, a thing. It could be photography. It could be anything. It could be greater than that. So what matters most is it's a tough question, but it's also one of those questions that's notorious because it's so hard to answer. Admission teams put this question on the application for a purpose because they realize that if you know the answer to this question, what matters most, writing it down isn't the difficult part of it. The harder part is actually spending the time in reflection answering the question, what matters most? So, how would you answer that question? What matters most? Do you know? In 2010, a New York Times journalist asked a number of well-known people what mattered most, and here are a few of their answers. The United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said, building a more equitable society for all. Sylvia Earle, a famous ocean explorer and advocate, said protecting the oceans. Alec Lorez, a youth climate campaigner, said climate change. Don Pettit, and I have to admit I'm a bit biased on this one, an astronaut, said space exploration. A lot of things matter. And if you ask a high schooler what matters most, or maybe somebody graduating from college right now, they might say money. Making money matters a lot, especially if you don't have a lot of it. But that brings up an important point. I'm not asking the question, does it matter? We'll hear a lot of things today, and there's a lot of things that matter. But what I'm asking the question is, what matters most? It's a small but fundamental point to understand, and fundamentals really matter. So, I grew up in Wisconsin, and if you know anything about Wisconsin, you know that it's the land of the cheese and the Packers. And you put those two things together, you get the cheese head. Now, how many people in here are from Wisconsin? All right, so you guys understand now. I was going to wear this cheese head through the whole talk, but I got some advice that you probably wouldn't take me seriously if I did that, so I'll go ahead and pass it back. Now, growing up in Wisconsin, we learned a lot about this guy, Vince Lombardi. He's one of the greatest coaches of all time. Vince Lombardi was a great coach because he understood that the fundamentals matter. He's kind of a legend and a myth in Wisconsin, and so we tell a lot of stories about Vince Lombardi, and one of them goes like this. Vince Lombardi would start training camp with a very simple exercise. He'd look at all of his athletes who'd been playing the game for many years, and he'd hold up a football and he'd say, gentlemen, this is a football. And he'd talk about the size and the shape and how it could be carried and passed. And then he'd take everybody out to the field as if they'd never seen it. And they'd say, gentlemen, this is a football field. He'd talk about its width and its length and how you could play plays on it and essentially how the game was played. And he did this because Vince Lombardi realized that even if he had the most gifted athletes in the world, he'd never have a championship team unless they mastered the fundamentals of the game. And we all know how this story ended. Vince Lombardi went on to win the first 2 Super Bowls ever in 1966 and 67, thereby establishing the Packers as the greatest football team ever, which is still true today. And I think most of us intuitively understand that fundamentals matter. We get that. We're adults, right? We understand that. But the thing about life is that we get so distracted. There's so many things that command our attention, priorities, parenting, our jobs, putting bread on the table. There's a lot of things that are important. But I would contend today that figuring out and reflecting on the question, what matters most, is one of those fundamentals in life that we should figure out. And we should revisit regularly so that we can revisit every day so that we're getting the most out of life. So that's my goal today. My goal is to inspire you to answer this fundamental question for yourself so that you can spend the rest of your life every single day doing something about it. So I'm going to give you a simple framework to think about, 3 simple steps based on my own personal experience and life lessons. So step 1, explore. I started my career 15 years ago, I was really lucky, at a place called the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory. It's a giant pool, one of the world's largest pools, 6.2 million gallons of water, 40 feet deep, 200 feet long, 100 feet wide. We have the International Space Station mocked up under the water. And we train astronauts how to do spacewalks in this pool. I had the chance for many years to witness firsthand exploration, up close and personal, from some of the best who did it every day. There's an astronaut named Frank Borman. I don't know if you've heard of him or not, probably not. He was an Apollo 8 commander, one of the first to actually travel around the moon. He said this: exploration is really the essence of the human spirit. And I think he's exactly right. Exploration is important because it leads to everything else. It's the act of searching for the purpose of discovery. And it could be the discovery of information or resources or experiences, but ultimately exploration leads to something that exists that we just didn't know about. Exploration, oftentimes the result of exploration, is something that we could never have predicted before we set out on the journey. Exploration is exciting. If you've never been on an exploration before, I encourage you to go. But here's the thing about exploration. Very few of us actually explore. We leave the exploration up to the professionals. Most of us in this room, most of our friends we know, are merely spectators. And that's disappointing because we have a lot of justifications for it. It might be too expensive, it might be too time-consuming, it might be too risky, but we're missing out on a lot. So the first step is to explore. There's a great movie that came out recently that really illustrates this point. It's called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Who's seen that movie? All right, for those that haven't, it's described as an American romantic adventure fantasy comedy drama. I mean, it literally has something for everybody. So in the movie, Walter Mitty is a photographer at Life magazine, and he frequently daydreams about fantastic adventures that he never actually has. So one day, like all men that I know, he was propelled to change by a woman that he loved, his coworker Cheryl. And he fell in love with Cheryl and wanted to impress her, so he set out on an adventure, a real adventure, forever changing everything. See, Walter Mitty was like a lot of us. He daydreamed, and it may seem simple, the first step, but I really challenge you to explore. Step out on the ledge of life and take a chance. Not only will it change your life, but it's really the first critical step in figuring out what matters most. So a good place to start your journey, you're committed to exploring with me, a good place to start is to think about how you spend your time, your talent, and your treasures. All of us have time. All of us have, well, most of us have talent, and most of us have treasure. So how do you spend your time? What do you do with your talent? What do you do with your treasure? How you spend your time and your talent and your treasure really points to something bigger. It shows you what you value, but more importantly, it shows you what you believe. The average life expectancy in the US is 78.64 years. That's a 2011 stat. If you look at that as a number of months, that's 943 months. And that's what this looks like on a chart, 943 months. By the time you're 18, 216 months are gone. And if you're like me, I spent the first 18 years chasing girls. And so I wasn't really focused on what mattered most. Another 163 months are spent in retirement. And for many, retirement, you can be distracted by health concerns and financial issues. That leaves 564 months to really have an impact with your life and make a difference. Now, if I look at my own situation, there's 408 months left. I'm the red dot. And I don't know where you are in this journey, but I know one thing. You have less time today than you did yesterday. We all have an expiration date. So what are you doing with your time and your talent and your treasures? Some people spend their entire lives searching for the answer to the question, what matters most? Every conversation, every degree they pursue, every career job, every relationship is spent trying to fill this void. I really don't want that to be you. I don't want your life to become a tragedy chasing after the answer to that question. Some people wait until their midlife crisis to figure it out because obviously that's a good time to do it. You look back on your life and you reflect on the things that you didn't do and the person you didn't become, you get sad. You leave your family, quit your job, buy a motorcycle, and ride off into the sunset because that's obviously the solution. But I don't think a midlife crisis is inevitable. I want you to figure out what matters most today so you can spend the rest of your life every single day doing something about it. You just have to quit daydreaming about exploring and actually start exploring. So I've got an experiment that I need your help with. You guys are already practiced at this, so this shouldn't be too difficult. You don't have to worry about the person next to you. I'd like to take you on an adventure like Walter Mitty, and we're going to go on an adventure to Alaska. So I need you to close your eyes. Imagine that you're in Alaska. You're leading an expedition like Shackleton or Lewis and Clark to an uncharted territory. You've never been there before. It's winter. There's 100 men and women looking for you to help them find food and shelter. You know one thing. You know that you need to go north. Now, with your eyes closed, point to the direction which you think north is. All right, everybody point. Now open your eyes. We got one guy pointing up. We got some people pointing over here and some people pointing over here. It's kind of funny because if we left it up to ourselves, we'd be stranded. Now, there's some research that suggests that if you follow the crowd and we took the average here, we might find out which north is, which direction north is. And that's true, but there's a better way. One of the fundamentals about exploration is that if you have a compass, you know which direction north is. And I can tell you with certainty that north is that direction. So the question I have for you is, what's your compass? So for some, your compass might be your values. For some, your compass might be your passion. I think the answer is bigger than that. I think the answer is what you believe is ultimately your compass, because your beliefs govern the decisions you make, the actions you take, and the actions that you don't take. But nonetheless, whatever your compass is, you should figure it out. If you don't have a compass, a really good place to start to figure out what matters most is to find a compass. We all believe in something. What do you believe in? And that brings up my second point. Explore with context. Sometimes figuring out the answer to the question what matters most is easier if you don't look at who you are today, but who and what shaped you along the way. So there's a story about the great artist Michelangelo. And when he carved his great work, the David, he started with a block of marble that looked very, very similar to this. Now, he's famous for saying that he could see in his block of marble his David. All he had to do was remove the non-essentials, and he found David. He knew it was there. But my question is, how many of you would have actually seen David by looking at this block of marble? Or here's another way to look at it. Think about yourself, or think about the Grand Canyon. How would you describe it? Most of us would say that it's wide, it's deep. Some of the more observative and non-color-blinded people in the room would say that it's beautiful, it has rich hues. And those things are all true and they all matter. But what we want to know is what shaped the Grand Canyon over lifespans. It was the water and the wind. There's a greater story here to the Grand Canyon than what you see today. It's a beautiful picture. So in your own life, it might be obvious to point out who you are today, but it's better to look at what shaped you and formed you over time. So you need to think about the Michelangelos and the Grand Canyon in your life. Finally, exploration is a lot of fun, and the journey is a really great journey. But if you don't learn if you don't let what you learn along the journey shape who you are, you realize that there's something misplaced about your journey. Many people have the exploration bug, but ultimately you want to let what you are exploring have a purpose. You want to have it shape who you are. So my final point is explore with not only context, but with purpose. I was very careful today not to ask you a question that a lot of people will ask you. And you might actually talk about this, and it might be naturally where you go. A lot of people, if you look this up online, there's books written about the question, what matters most? And what they get at is what matters most to you. The reason I didn't ask the question, what matters most to you, and include those words is because fundamentally, I don't think the answer is about you at all. I think by adding the words to you, we're making a self-centered assumption that the answer is about us. And really, I don't think it's about our personal happiness. Although it matters, I don't think that's the ultimate thing. I don't think it's about our own prosperity. I don't think it's about anything about us at all. And I think the longer you explore, the more you realize that the world is not as small as you think it is. Our answers to the question, what matters most, can be very, very different. But if you really, really reflect on it, you realize that the common denominator of a lot of our answers is that it's not about us. When you start to explore, you start to recognize that there's other people on similar journeys as you. It might be the person in the seat next to you. It might be the person who shares an apartment with you. It might be the person in a cubicle next to you. Or it might be the person on the sidewalk. And you start to realize when you're on an exploration, if you're really aware, that there might be other people on similar journeys. And you start to talk to them and you realize, wow, They have problems too, just like me. We're all human. But then you realize maybe their problems are bigger than mine. They're in need of help and hope in their loss. And you realize, wow, if I wanted to, I could have an impact on their lives. And so that's what I want to challenge you to do today. I want you to take what you hear within these walls and have an impact on those outside of these walls. And that brings me back to the original question we started with. What matters most? How would you answer that question? If you've never answered that question, I really encourage you to go home and write an essay. I know a lot of you haven't written essays since high school. Here's your chance. And I'll give you permission not to even have to use a pencil. You can do it on your computer. But seriously, answer the question, what matters most? Or think about it like this. If you're applying to a prestigious university, what would you say to get in? Or maybe more importantly, if you were giving that commencement speech at the prestigious university at graduation to 1,000 people looking your way, and you had one opportunity to answer the question, what matters most? What would you say? Or if your son or daughter was pulling on your pant leg and saying, Daddy, Mommy, what matters most? What would you tell them? Or if you had a chance right now to write the eulogy of your life, to give at your funeral, and you could look back and you had just a couple minutes to summarize what mattered most in your life, what would you say? If I was answering this question, it would be short. I think the admissions committee would be kind of frustrated with me, so I'd probably have to add some more fluff to explain it a bit more. I'd answer with 4 words. What matters most is what I believe. See, everything you do can be traced back to what you believe. Your deepest beliefs hold your attention and propel you to action. Your deepest beliefs can also prevent you from taking any action at all. But the more I think about it, I'd actually probably answer it this way. What matters most is what we believe. See, it's one thing to have a firmly rooted belief system in your personal life and see the effects, but it's quite another to see it in action when a large group of people combine around a shared belief. Think about it like the wind. Here's a wind map of the United States from just 2 days ago. Not every wind is going in the same direction, but what you see is that there's a lot of wind going in the same direction. You can't necessarily see the wind, but you know it's there. And in your own life, this might be a community of people that you know that have a common purpose and direction. That community of people gathered around a common belief can change the world. It's more important than ever to recognize the power to choose. If you want to have an impact on the world, figure out what matters most. Figure out how you're going to spend your time, your talent, and your treasures, and what you believe. And if you don't know what matters most, you don't know how you'd answer that question, figure it out today so that you can live the rest of your life having an impact and leaving your footprint. If you already know what matters most in your life, don't waste any more time letting your time, your treasures, and your talent match up to what you believe. Thank you.